warm welcome to Nirmal Bang, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Datia. We have with us Mr. Rajan Sethuraman, Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Rajan Venkatesan, Chief Financial Officer at Latent View Analytics, joining in on the show. Welcome to the show, gentlemen, and it's always a pleasure to speak to you and see companies like yours grow the way they are growing. And congratulations once again from our side on the IPO as well. Firstly, let me start off with, details about, I know the anchor book details are already out, but how is the anchor book looking? What is the response so far, today being the last day?
Hiral, I'll take that question. So like you mentioned, yes, the anchor book details are already public, but we did have a very, very strong and overwhelming response to our anchor book. In fact, it was a very, very difficult 1 week where we all had to get together and decide on who would we give out allocations to. If you look at how our anchor book has been built out, close to about 60% has been allocated to all the tier 1 mutual funds in the country, right from Axis Mutual Fund to ICICI Pru Life, to Mirae, to Franklin Templeton. All the big mutual funds participated in a big way in our anchor book. So that was about 60% of our total anchor book. The remaining 10% was again taken up by insurance companies based out of India, the likes of SBI Life and as well as Bajaj Allianz. And then the FII portion of our anchor book was close to about 29%. Over here, again, we had certain marquee names such as the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. We also had PSP, which is the Canadian Pension Fund, which came in. And then we had a couple of others, which is Kotak Offshore, as well as we had White Oak Capital, which came in through their overseas fund. So yeah, so that's the composition of our anchor book. And yeah, I mean, you would have seen the response to our IPO, and still continues to be fairly overwhelming for all of us. We've seen a very, very strong momentum and demand for our issue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So overall, 600 crores is what we are raising. 474 is supposed to be raised from fresh issue, and the remaining is an OFS. Now, in terms of utilization of funds, what is that looking like? What's the objective?
So if you look at the primary portion, you're right. It's about 474 crores. Out of that 474 crores, close to about $20 million, about 148 crores has been specifically earmarked for inorganic acquisitions. Here we want to make or we want to go after assets or companies which would help us, one, create a significant presence in geographies or in service offerings which we currently don't provide to our customers. So about close to about 20 million would be earmarked for inorganic acquisitions. The remaining portion of our primary issuance has been earmarked to capitalize our subsidiaries in the European region as well as Southeast Asia, where we today have a fledgling business, but these contribute to about 6% of our overall revenues. We believe there is significant potential for us to scale up our operations in these subsidiaries. So a portion of the remaining proceeds would go on to capitalize our subsidiaries. About 80 odd crores would go on to strengthen the working capital requirements of our operations in the United States. So that's the broad construct of our how we intend to use the primary portion of our fundraise.
Right. With all of this, if you guys could just take a couple of minutes to explain exactly what's the working, how is the business looking like for an investor to get an update of, yes, this is what I want to invest in.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take that, Hiral. And thank you for having us on the show. It's a pleasure. We are what we call a pure play data and analytics company. I mean, obviously, everybody talks about digital these days with everything going online, right? Whether it is e-commerce or whether it is education, right? The digital spectrum itself is fairly broad. You would have heard of the SMAC acronym, right? The social, mobility, analytics, and cloud. So we operate within the analytics part of that. So we are fairly focused in what we do. But within the data analytics spectrum, we do everything, right? In the sense that We start off with helping clients think through their analytics strategy and help them figure out what sort of initiatives they should be going after, where the power of data analytics can be used to help them reach their business goals and objectives.
Correct.
Once we help them with the strategy part and identification of the initiatives, we also help them figure out how to bring all the data that is necessary together into one place. Typically, companies have data in disparate ecosystems. They could be having it in their ERP, in their transaction processing system, the customer interaction systems, in their employee systems, for example. In addition to that, companies also look at external data from the social media, for example, customer reviews, right? Or employee reviews on Glassdoor, and they want to make use of that information as well. And many organizations these days have also implemented a lot of sensors, right? Either on their products and devices, or it could be in their manufacturing system. So the data ecosystem is fairly disparate in most organizations. So we help architect the right kind of platforms to bring all of this data together into one place, so that you can then do the analysis that's necessary for you to answer the business questions, right? And the problems that they're trying to solve, which is really the bulk of the business. The consulting part, as I said earlier, is like about 15%, and the data engineering and the data platform is about 20% of the work. The bulk of the work, 60% of the work that we do, is really in helping do analytics and analysis of all of the data and help generate the right kind of insights that can inform business decision making. So we do both look back and look ahead analytics. Look back is historical in nature, trying to answer questions around what happened and why did it happen. And look ahead is where we use all of the artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques to predict, right, and prescribe a course of action that they can take. So that's the bulk of the work. In terms of the value chain, most of the work we do is at the front end of the value chain. Customer and marketing analytics is the mainstay. And there we get into things like customer segmentation, cross-sell, upsell opportunities, loyalty, personalization, customer lifetime value, and so on. And in the marketing area, return on investment, spend analysis and optimization, looking at campaign analytics and optimizing it, right? Basically, how can companies advertise and market their products and services in the most optimal fashion, right? That's really the big chunk of work. Supply chain, finance, risk, and people analytics make up the rest of the work we do. We mostly work with Fortune 500 companies. So about 50 accounts at this time, 30 plus accounts are Fortune 500 companies. Wow. And as Raj mentioned, most of our business is in the US at this point in time. We have subsidiaries in Europe, but we are looking to grow those businesses on the back of this IPO. And a lot of the work that we do is for technology companies, digital native technology companies. And 4 out of the top 5 tech companies in the world are accounts at this time. So we do a lot of work for the technology ecosystem. So the main expertise that we bring to the table in some sense is a rich and deep understanding of the technology and the digital native ecosystem. And how can you make use of all of the data that you're able to collect, right, to power the decision-making of organizations. So I'll stop there. We'll get into more detail.
One thing what interests me over here is, we're talking of the US, we're talking of Europe. What about India? Because India as a market is now growing on the digital aspect of it as well, especially since the time COVID has come in. A lot of systems are being in place. Companies, in fact, across sectors, we are seeing a lot of innovations that are happening, to get transformed into that digital structure. So any plans with regards to business in India?
Absolutely. I mean, in the sense that India as a market, right, is maturing very, very fast. In fact, on another interview, somebody asked us, why did you choose to go IPO in India, right, versus maybe listing on the NASDAQ? And our point is that, see, this is where our talent base is. Today, when we look at even our employees, or when we look at clients and customers and other partners we interact with, the richness in terms of the digital maturity and the understanding, right, that is going up really steep and really fast. So therefore, at some point in time, I'm sure that our offerings and our value propositions would be relevant, right, to the India market as well. In some sense, we kind of turned our attention to the US after the first 2-3 years in India, right? We started off in 2006. The first 2 years were working with Indian companies, mostly in the insurance space. At a point in time, I think we worked with 7 out of the top insurance companies in India at the time. But on the back of the credit crisis, we turned our attention to the US. And one thing led to another. And then much of the management time, attention, and bandwidth has been taken up by growing the business, right, in the US itself. The US is a huge market, as you know, and There's a lot of work that that can be done in that space. So much so that even Europe, which is a larger, which is a pretty big market, we have not been able to devote as much attention as we would have liked to. That is one of the things that we would like to change going forward, right? In terms of making sure that markets where there are potential, right, we are able to bring in the kind of sales and business development, marketing, as well as delivery capabilities so that we can grow those businesses. I expect that the India market will also mature fast, and we will start looking at how we can bring some of the capabilities, right, to the organizations that are moving up the digital maturity chain here.
Right. So is there any go-to-market strategy for India that is already in place?
Not yet. I mean, this is something that we will evolve. On the back of the IPO, the one thing that we do want to do certainly is to take a very close look at Europe. We have already subsidiaries in the UK and in Germany and in Netherlands. Together, these three markets account for 70 of the Fortune 500 companies. So it's a pretty big market out there. Today, we work only with some 2-3 of them. So there's a huge amount of potential there. So right now, we are looking at doubling down and going after the opportunity in Europe itself. And as we are able to mature that, right, in a few years' time, I'm sure that other opportunities in other geographies also will become interesting.
Right. So with all of this, how much revenue do we get from the top 10 companies or the top 10 clients, I would say?
Raj, maybe you can answer this and then I can.
So we can probably just, go back to the DRHP. If you look at our top 5 customers, they contribute close to about 50% plus of our revenues. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And with this, now that when we're talking of expansion as well, in other markets, when we're talking of growth, what's the kind of inorganic growth we are looking at, number one? And again, inorganic growth will be in what kind of regions?
Right. So we are looking to stay closely aligned with our philosophy, as well as the wheelhouse of work we do, right? Philosophy in the sense that we will continue to look at opportunities where we have the penetration possibilities into Fortune 500 companies, right? Because our philosophy has been that work with a smaller number of companies, but with those companies, go deep and broad, right? Do a full broad spectrum of work within the data analytics space. So this is a philosophy that we will stay aligned to. So in some sense, the opportunities that we are looking at, we will see whether they bring us opportunities in the target geographies, like the US and European markets that I talked about. Also in the nature of the work that I talked about, right, in terms of the consulting capability, the data engineering and the data platform work, and more so in the predictive prescriptive analytics space. So these are the areas where we are looking at opportunities. There's a lot of action in this space. I mean, over 900 M&A transactions in the last 12, 18 months alone, right? And this is a growing space. So obviously you find a lot of startups, young companies, right, with very interesting ideas and innovation. As we speak, I mean, we are evaluating a bunch of them, right? We keep getting 1 or 2 every week. So we are fairly confident, right, that in the next few quarters, we'll be able to identify and integrate some very interesting opportunities, right, into our ecosystem.
Right. And what is the average ticket size that you look at with a client? So
I will maybe give you a little bit of a split. I mean, there are 2 broad buckets of work in terms of the engagement model. We typically go into a fixed fee project, right? When we start off work with a particular account, right? It's a particular initiative, right? There's a very well-defined scope of work, and it's therefore set up in a fixed fee, fixed scope type of a model. In those instances, the engagement size can be anywhere between $150 to $1 million, $1.5 million. I mean, we see a fairly broad spectrum depending on the size and the complexity of the work. About 30% of the work that we do is of a fixed fee, fixed scope nature. 65% of the work that we do is in a managed services contract. So in a managed services model, we set up the analytics center of excellence, right, so to speak. And this becomes either the exclusive or the extended analytics capability for the client organization. I talked about the consulting work that we do, right, which is the roadmap and the book of initiatives. So once we define that kind of a strategy and set up a book of initiatives, then this analytics COE becomes the main engine, right, to execute on all that book of work. And in these instances, we have a larger 3 years or more master services agreement. and there is an annual statement of work, right, that gets renewed, right, year on year. In these type of constructs, we typically see starting points of about $500,000, so $500,000. And there are engagements today which have scaled all the way to 10 million or more. Yeah. So we have, and some of that scaling up has happened fairly rapidly, right, in the last 2-3 years. So that is one reason why we are really excited. Everybody talks about how the pandemic has resulted in an inflection point, right, when it comes to IT services and digital work. And we see that very much, right, in all the conversations that we are having, as well as the scaling up that we are seeing in the clients' businesses.
Right. And with this, which are the sectors which are dominant in this space?
Right. So for us, it's technology, which is really the biggest vertical. We do 2/3 of our work in the technology industry. And the other sectors that we play in are industrials, which is really a mix of automotive, manufacturing, and logistics and oil and gas. Then we do work in retail and consumer products. That's another big vertical for us. And finally, we have banking, financial services, and insurance. Interestingly, if you look at IT services or even digital work, it's really the reverse order. I mean, most other large organizations do plenty of work in the BFSI space. They do a lot of work in retail and consumer products. Our initial foray, right, into the US market, and also a lot of the expertise and capability that we have built has been on the back of working with tech companies. In some sense, technology companies tend to be at the cutting edge, right, when it comes to using technology to their advantage. And therefore, data analytics is no exception. A lot of the capabilities, a lot of the technology tools, the algorithms are invented in some sense, right, by these tech companies. And it's a matter of great confidence for us, right, that we have learned data analytics working with these companies, right, and then doing work for them. So today, when we look at the more traditional sectors, like a retail, CPG, or a BFSI, we are very excited by the prospects of how we can apply all of that learning into these sectors as well. So the expectation is that over the next 2-3 years, the mix will change. Technology will continue to grow for us, but we are expecting BFSI and retail CPG to grow even faster. And therefore, we will potentially now maybe get to a balance where half of our work will be from the technology space and the other half coming from all the other sectors.
Right. One sector I would want to ask you about is education. The government, at least in terms of where India goes, has laid out NEP 2020, which is actually a completely new architecture on the digital front. And that seems to be a big opportunity as well coming in, for any of these analytic companies, tech companies, etc. Would you see this as an opportunity as well? Because NDR is something that they have started off with. They're building the architecture to have a complete new framework for digital education. How big is education as an opportunity for a company like yours?
It could be a fairly significant opportunity. I mean, we haven't done too much of work in the edu-tech space so far. But if you look at it, right, I mean, all of these initiatives are aimed at 2 or 3 things. Right? One is to make sure that there are enough people acquiring and building the skills that will be relevant for the economy, right? Not just from a career perspective or a compensation perspective, but like the Make in India initiative, for example, right? How can upskilling be relevant, right, to the country, right, the economy as a whole? And that is where you can start using data and analytics in a fairly interesting way, right? Because typically you always have some kind of an information asymmetry problem, right? There are employers looking for people with very particular skill sets, and we face this, right, when we are hiring people as well. And then there are employees, right, or candidates who are looking for the right kind of opportunities. So how can you bridge the gap between the two? Now, how much do employers know about the potential candidates, and how much do candidates know about the employees, right? Can we use algorithms and data and analytics around the skill sets that are available and what they have acquired, right? And how confident and how proficient they are in? You can actually apply it in that space. In education itself, if you're able to connect the dots between what the industry is looking for, what kind of opportunities are available in terms of online learning as well as offline learning, and where do the career interests of young students lie, right? If you can bring these all together using data analytics in a seamless fashion, then now you're able to solve some very pertinent and interesting problems. So while we are not doing any work in the space right now, we do see that these are all very exciting spaces, right, that one can look at. Obviously, I mean, we will want to partner with those organizations, right, that show a certain degree of enthusiasm and maturity, right, in pursuing these kind of initiatives. And if the right opportunities come by, definitely, yeah, we would be interested.
Right. And very lastly, in terms of financials as well, I know we can't give forward-looking statements right now, but the kind of CAGR growth that we've seen in the past 3 to 5 years, is that something that we aim to continue, or do you think we will be better?
Right. Let me touch upon this, and then maybe Raj can add in some of the numbers. We have had a fairly strong growth right through our years. I mean, we were on the Deloitte Technology Fast 50 for 9 years in a row. And in the last 5 years, if I take the 2015 to 20 timeframe, we had a CAGR of about 25%, right? 18 to 25, no, 20% on an average. What we have seen in the last 2-3 years, though, is a little bit of a flat revenue profile for 2 reasons. One is we are obviously, like everybody else, there was an impact of COVID, right, in FY21. But we also strategically, we decided to reshape our business, right? There was a book of work that was more in the nature of providing point expertise. We decided to exit that book of work and then focus more on the managed services kind of models that I talked about, right? The analytics COE kind of model. And that meant a reshaping of the business. That reshaping is done now. Our margin profile improved significantly on the back of that. The demand for our services has come back really strong, right? After the first 2 quarters of the last year being a little low profile. From the 3rd quarter onwards, it's become a fairly strong demand. And we see that continuing into this fiscal as well. So the 1st quarter numbers are included in the RHP now. But if I look at what's happening in terms of the number of conversations and the quality of the conversations that we are having, it's a very, very strong profile that we see now. So we are very confident at this point in time that our growth will continue to beat industry average numbers, right? We'll be significantly upwards of that, right, in terms of what we are experiencing. Raj, do you want to add anything in terms of?
In fact, to this, if you could even add, Raj, in terms of the market share, how does that look like for a company like ours?
Raj, you're on mute. Sorry, if you can.
Hiral, so the way we look at the market share, right? We don't want to go and look at everything that's out there in the data and analytics space. If you look at the industry report itself, which we've included in the DRHP, the total size of the market is like way bigger, right? So it's close to about 170 billion or 180 billion at this point in time, expected to grow up to 330 billion by 2025. We play in a much more, if I were to call, a more premium and niche segment within the data and analytics space itself. And even over there, for instance, if you look at in terms of the verticals that we operate in, we work with some of the largest tier 1 technology companies in the world. So that's our strong forte at this point in time. In fact, we take a lot of pride in the fact that for some of our largest clients, close to 80% of the work that we do, we are with the single service provider. So we have no direct competition at all. We don't. So only 20% of our work today, if you really look at it, we actually even compete with other service providers through an RFP mode or giving a competitive quotation. So for 80% of the work that we deliver today, we are sole sourced. So in that sense, where we operate today, we don't have a lot of competition, and market share is not something that we very closely track at this point in time, because we believe there is significant headroom for us to grow. We are, if you look at the overall pie that is available, we, both in terms of the number of Fortune 500 clients just in the US as well as in Europe, there is significant headroom for us at this point in time. So market share is not a constraint for us at this point in time, if I were to put it.
Right. So overall, it seems to be like a good path, a good space that you guys are in as well. Thank you so much, Rajan Sethuraman, as well as Rajan Venkatesan, for joining us on the show. Pleasure to speak to you guys, and congratulations once again, and good luck for the listing process. We will speak soon.
Thank you, Hiral. Yeah, nice being on the show.
Thank you.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.